Welcome back, everyone, to the Property Journey Podcast, episode 33. Welcome, Roy.
Afternoon, Chris.
It's been a few weeks since we've managed to get in front of the mics, just before the end of summer rush. So we're going to be back with a bang. I've got your calendar all blocked out for the foreseeable future, right up to Christmas. So we're going to be here.
Get all these podcasts done.
Get all these done and keep the listeners happy. Today's topic, I wanted to talk about different investment scenarios. So just they could be random scenarios that might crop up if people are obviously going through the journey of obviously investing in property. Each of these scenarios is going to be slightly different. It might involve, maybe, for example, a joint venture and someone decides, no, you know what, I want out. How do you deal with that? What's the best way to deal with it? Might be even as simple as you go to buy a property and the next minute the seller decides, nah, I'm not selling to you. And what do you do in that scenario? So just a few of these just to run past you and give the listeners a wee bit of insight into, if they're faced with it, what their potential outcomes could be. So the first one, the first scenario is, as I've mentioned, the deal falls through at the last minute. So you're obviously in the process of buying a property. You get maybe right the way through and all of a sudden just bang, the purchases fell through. So how would you deal with that scenario, or what's the kind of the outcomes on it?
Well, first of all, positively, it's very rare that deals fall through. Most of the time that they fall through, it's maybe impatience, whereby purchasers maybe taking a wee bit too long, maybe pulling the finances together, or their legal teams maybe a wee bit too slow, so the seller gets a wee bit frustrated. Another time it could be maybe a survey was done on the property and it's showing up a lot of things that need to be fixed, and the cost of that is very high, and the seller isn't willing to negotiate or drop the price or work on it in any way. Those are normally discussions that happen towards the very tail end of a transaction, and then it's normally down to frustrations that it falls through, thankfully. Well, I say thankfully as in, if it does fall through, it's at the tail end and it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah. And I suppose then as well as that, then what kind of then is the outcome of that? Is it, you're left with a potential legal bill for work done to date? Is it maybe a case of the solicitor will say, go out and find yourself another one and we'll cut a deal here? Is that kind of where you just maybe have to pick yourself up and go again and look for another property that is on the market?
Well, if you're acting as a seller, well then the legal fees, normally the solicitor will charge you for all the work that's been done. Now, if you put the property back on the market again and there is another buyer found fairly soon, it depends on the solicitor. Some solicitors take a view of, well, I'm starting again, I'm doing a lot of this work again. Yes, there's a lot of it duplicated, but they still treat it as a whole brand new file. Other solicitors will say, right, well, you've done a wee bit of work there as a goodwill gesture, we'll go easy on you on the second bill. I suppose it's the exact same actually for the buyer point of view as well. It really comes down to how good of a relationship you have with your solicitor. And I've said this before, you do get investors or you get people who chop and change between solicitors. They think they're maybe pricing around and they're saving money. They're not. If you're an investor and you're buying a lot of property, you need a solicitor on your side so that whenever it comes to a point where you've got a deal and it needs to happen very quickly, you've got that solicitor who knows, right, well, this is genuine, let's do what we can here. Whereas if you're chopping and changing, you go into the queue and that's it. So in the long run, if you build up a good relationship with a solicitor and a transaction falls through, depending, they may not charge you or they will go easy on you.
And I suppose there, as you say, a scenario like this here doesn't happen too often, but if you're buying and selling property as an investor quite often, the chances are something like this will happen to you more so than a first-time buyer, or you know what I mean, because you're in the property game a lot more than what someone that's just buying a house to live in is going to be, because once they bought the house, they're maybe there for 10, 15, 20 years. A property investor could be buying a house every month or every couple, 2 or 3 every year or whatever. Obviously, at the minute, the interest rates are coming down. But there was a period there a couple of years ago, the interest rates were increasing quite rapidly. The scenario kind of is, what happens then when those interest rates are rising as they were, 0.25%, 0.5%, nearly every month there, in terms of your cash flow then?
Well, from your cash flow point of view, it depends if you've got mortgages. So that, this only impacts you if you have mortgages. So if you own property outright, whatever the interest rates are, it has no impact on you. The vast majority of investors and property owners would have finance or have mortgages. So it all depends on whether you've got a mortgage term or you're in a fixed deal. So most people take out a mortgage just maybe for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So it all depends where you are on that curve. So if you're in a fixed deal and the interest rates go way up and they come back down again before you come out of your term, it has no impact on you whatsoever. It's where people are hit massively is if they're in a really, really low rate. So like maybe people coming out of COVID was borrowing at something crazy low.
Yeah.
And then the interest rates jumped way up to over 5% and they were maybe coming out of that deal. So that immediately overnight their mortgage payment is jumping really, really high. So it's a matter, you can't really time it, but it's knowing
where you are,
and it's your view on risk. Some people have a view, well, you know what, I want to be comfortable, and regardless of what interest rates are, I'm just going to lock in for 5 years, and at least they know comfortably for 5 years where they're at, which might give them a bit of time actually to save up a few pounds as well, so that whenever they come out of that 5 year deal, regardless of the interest rates, they've maybe a wee bit of money to put at the mortgage. The debt's a lot lower, so they're not really impacted much.
I suppose probably one of the scenarios there would be if you, as you've said there, if you maybe have 4 or 5 houses and you tied them all in at the same time.
You tie them all in at the same time and you're coming out at the same time.
Yeah.
You hurt very quickly.
Yeah, and that's obviously that is going to have an impact on your cash flow because, your mortgage could have went from, say, and I'm throwing figures around here, but say 200 quid to £600 or £700 per each property. Yeah. And at that point, if you don't have a backup there, you're up. Up the left a wee bit.
Owning property is like a business. It's just not a matter of, right, well, this is today, this is what the rent is, these are what the costs are. You have to factor in, if it's not making you a lot of money now, well, then there's no point doing that, because if there's other costs that rise, if your insurance costs rise or your maintenance costs rise, and you have everything else and you don't have a sufficient slush fund or any other income coming into it, that's whenever it gets very difficult.
Yeah. Next kind of scenario then is, it probably has the element of cash flow in this, but your tenants stop paying rent. So you own a property, the tenants decided to either stop paying rent or has fallen into arrears. What is your steps within that scenario? How do you sort of navigate that one?
Best advice is you need to be on the ball very quickly. So that means you need to see straight away when the tenant has stopped paying, and you need to be on the ball. So sometimes it's a matter of maybe they've just forgot to set up the payment. A lot of tenants, they don't have a direct debit or standing order. They manually send the payment every month or every week. So it might be the case where they've just forgotten, or they've just done it over a period of time and it's slipped into the next couple of days or what have you, or a bank holiday. So it's being on the ball to see, is that the case, or have they genuinely defaulted? Also, it sounds quite harsh, but you need to really be switched on to, is the reason that they give you, is it genuine? Maybe it's just my legal background where you question everything, whereby if they give you a reason and you really say, well, show me, or ask another leading question to see, is it genuine, or are they making an excuse? Sometimes maybe a tenant could say to you, I've went on holidays, or I'm going back home. Can I pay you when I come back? Well, you pay for the roof over your head before you start spending on the enjoyment. So it's a matter you keep on top of it. But to move on then, if it's a case whereby the tenant hasn't paid, then you need to act very quickly, whereby you need to issue your notice to quit. If you wait and maybe give too much of an opportunity and they're not genuine, then you've just wasted those weeks or that time frame. Whereas if they're not genuine, they've defaulted, they have no intentions of getting caught up again, then you need to have your notice to quit already served, the clock running, so that once those 8 weeks are up immediately, bang, you've got your application into the court. So again, you need to be on with your solicitor, sitting ready to go. Comes back to it again, if you're starting fresh with a new solicitor, that solicitor's going to say, well, I'm not going to, well, on average, they're going to say, well, new client, let's get you booked in, wait till that 8 weeks is up, let's review it, what have you. Whereas if you're continually with that solicitor, then they will have all the paperwork organised, ready for you. So as soon as it hits 8 weeks, boom, that's into the court, and the whole process is starting as quickly as possible.
Yeah. As you say there, it's back to the rapport that you have with your solicitor, and if they're obviously helping you within your, buying and selling your property, and that side of things, then they're also able to help you when it comes to, this side of things as well. One of the ones I'm not too sure you might know in your renovation side of things, but you've maybe bought a property with the intentions of renovating, doing it up, probably maybe needs planning permission. What do you do when the planning permission is denied?
Well, anything I've done hasn't entailed planning permission, because normally it's a bigger project, and it's just not something that I would personally bite off. But it would always be good to have your relationship with your architect before you've actually done that, and have the architect not guarantee to you, but at least say, well, listen, from my experience, I'm very certain that you'll have no issues here. In theory, you shouldn't have started any work on the property until you've got that planning permission through. Normally you need planning permission if you're changing the outside look of the house and maybe putting on a bigger structure and things like that. So it would be a fairly big project if you're doing that. So for the vast majority of property investors, they normally wouldn't be taking that on board. But if your planning permission has been rejected, you need to see why. Hopefully it's a case of maybe just a few tweaks and you resubmit your application again, or it's dead in the water. And then that means if you have worked out your figures on buying the property, maybe refurbing it or selling it or what have you, hanging completely on the plan information, well then you're in trouble.
And that's where I was going to say, as you mentioned there, if it was denied, what was the reason? Could it be a case of the brickwork that you're planning on putting in the front doesn't match the rest of the street? Therefore, if you put in blockwork or stonework or whatever, that could maybe get it over the line. Is it those types of things rather than so much, I'm putting on a 6-bedroom extension here, that's going to take over the whole street, and that's the reason why that you're getting it denied?
It's normally if your plan or if your vision just doesn't fit in with how it looks, a simple way is if you're driving down the street and you look at it, are people going to say, whoa, what are they thinking of? Well, then simply, no.
I suppose it's probably the style of the houses as well. If you go in, say, and around the likes of maybe Armagh there or something, in some of the streets, it's the real old Georgian sort of style, properties, and the next minute you want to put a futuristic, glass-fronted building slap bang in the middle, between that style of house. Chances are you're not getting it across the line.
It's probably maybe more so down a commercial route. Maybe if there is a change from commercial to residential, that's there's a lot of people jumping on board with that. There's a lot of English influencers talking about buying commercial, convert to residential, and buy a shop and convert to residential. From my experience, that's very difficult to do here. Planners just they're not going to allow shops in the middle of a street to be turned into residential. So probably if you're buying for that sole purpose, you need to be very, very certain that you're going to get it. But do your homework. Do
your due diligence. Next one then is one of the ones I mentioned at the start of the podcast. You're going in obviously with a partner, joint venture, but they unexpectedly would like out. How would you deal with that scenario?
If it's something whereby they've already owned the property and they own it and time has passed and they want out, It can be quite difficult because it's a wee bit like a marriage. You know, if you want out, you know, if somebody's walking away from a marriage, there's always a matter of, well, who's getting what and how much. And whenever there's money, there's a row. So, and if you finance involved, it just leaves things very, very complicated. In a very simple world, you would say, right, let's just sell the property and pay off all the bills and we split the money out. That would be nice and simple. But that's not always the way it...
Be very amicable.
Very amicable.
Very
That's normally not the way. So it, in simple terms, it can be as simple or as messy as everybody makes it.
I suppose probably it's who you have went into the venture with.
Yes. Always be careful, like any partner, getting into business with somebody, getting into property ownership with people, it's like getting into a marriage. You know, you just don't go and randomly marry some stranger. You know, it's all about, have you got the same mindset, the same ethos, the same background, the same vision? Because if not, you know, that's it. And some people just aren't made for marriage and partnerships. And sometimes they always say, if you want a partner, get a dog.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
At least I can't talk back. That's joint ventures then. Be very careful about what you're doing at the very start. And then obviously if you do get down the route of someone wanting out early, as you say, it can be.
Any joint ventures that I personally do, we sit down at the very start and we basically say, this is the venture. This, here's our scheduled exits. And there's normally 3. And we also look at probably 4 to 5 what if scenarios, and we all come at it from the real negative point of view, and that's all thrashed out at the start. Now, I suppose in theory we don't have anything written down, but anybody that I work with, I've been working with them for many, many years.
Yeah.
And touch wood, so far everything has been fine. There's been times where we hit bumps in the road, and that's simply it. We accept, you know, listen, we took the, you know, we went with one of the partners as a decision over the other, and they've made the decision. We'll back them, and that's it. So,
I suppose it's back to risk. You know, you've taken the risk together, therefore you have to either, you know, take the rewards together, or you take the
troubles.
Take the troubles together as well. Void periods scenario obviously would be, you know, when you obviously own a property, you maybe had someone in, they've obviously now left the property, the property's void. What happens if you, for example, were expecting someone to be in the property within a month? You haven't got that. The period is obviously longer than what you were expecting.
I experience this a lot with the property management side of the business, particularly if an investor is mortgaged and they're hanging for the payment. You know, at the end of the day, you can't drag somebody off the street and make them live in your property. You know, if a house hasn't rented fairly quickly, there's a number of reasons. Maybe the product in itself is poor quality. Maybe your expectations in price aren't aligned. And also just sometimes it's the quality of the tenant that just aren't hitting your expectations. So, you know, at the end of the day, you normally find every house will rent at whatever price you want.
Yeah.
But it's the quality of the tenant. And I always say to a landlord, that's all right. I'll, if you want this rented out, I put somebody in here, they'll be in tomorrow. But I'm not standing over them. And if that tenant moves out or stops paying in 2 months' time or 3 months' time, don't come back to me. Whereas any other tenant that's put in, they're individually assessed. They're just not simply, oh, you've ticked that box, put them in. They're individually assessed. There's research put into them. There's the gut instinct put into it as well. And from that, I stand over that tenant as best as possible to say, listen, if this was my house, I would take them.
Yeah. Because I suppose, you know, it comes back as well whenever you're not, maybe weren't expecting the void periods. You know, there is the cash flow elements, but at the very start you should be building that in to have your buffer zone of enough cash there to be able to cover unexpected void, you know, periods. Is there things there like even offering short-term lets rather than tying someone in, say, for example, 6 months, a year? Is that even worthwhile looking at if you haven't been able to get the property rented out?
Generally not, because most people who are renting, they're not going to want 6 months. They're always going to want 12 months. So there's no real incentive to anybody, whether it's advertised as 6 months or 12 months. There'll be no incentive.
This kind of then is more your scenario back to if you're renovating. Unexpected refurbishment costs. Is there scenarios out there where you begin to refurb and you've maybe got a budget in your head because you're expecting this is all I'm doing? For example, all I have to do is replace the kitchen and maybe paint the walls or get someone in to paint the walls. But then you uncover something.
There's always something. You always have to have that factored in to your costings. And I'm trying to think of an example. There's always something maybe where you think, like the good old one, yes, wallpaper. No, there's a bit of wallpaper that'll be stripped off. But then you take into it and it's just a complete hack job. And even at that, maybe you think to yourself, well, there's 2 rooms need stripped. A lot of painters and decorators, it's not the most pleasant side of their job. And if somebody else just wants a house painted, they'll go to it first of all. So then that maybe takes more time.
Yeah.
So it's more money. Maybe then to take the wallpaper off, it's damaged, the skim. Then you're waiting on a plaster to come and fix that, then allowing it to dry and then get the painter back. So it kind of knocks out your time frames, and time frames can cost you money as well. So very rarely do you come across a refurb that runs smoothly and bang on.
Yeah. Because the notes I had there was about obviously reliable contractors and things like that there. You maybe get someone in, they don't do the job that you expected them to do, and then you have to go and get someone else to fix the job that was meant to be done right in the first place.
Yeah.
There's things there about regulation changes and stuff. We've obviously seen there, obviously within the last budgets and stuff, there was changes then and taxes and things like that. That can obviously be one scenario where out of the blue they announce a big change, and before you know it, in 6 months' time you're going to be paying a lot more tax on certain things. Have you any thoughts on that, or is that kind of just something that you have to take in the chin because it's the government?
You just have to, and the government just at the minute just seems to be not a fan of landlords, which doesn't scare me. At the end of the day, there's still always going to be people wanting to own property. There's going to be people who can't afford property and can only rent. So there's always going to be a balance there. It's just down to the mindset of the person who's going to own the property. And you probably, that mindset is split up into 3. You have, worryingly, there's a lot who are completely ignorant or arrogant, and that's either down to won't educate themselves, or maybe they don't know how to. So they themselves are just running on a gamble. At some point it's going to hit them, and hit them badly. You have people who are very organised, all over everything. Whatever's needs done, they'll get it done. They have all organised. And then you have those who are, you know what, I don't want any hassle. This is an investment for me, and they hand it all over to the property management. And to me, that's the way the most of it should be done. Where the government just doesn't seem to grasp it is the more regulations that they put in place, that's more work and more costs, whether it's the landlord doing it themselves or not, which ultimately means one thing.
Impacts the rents, and the rents go up.
Like the rents, like it's frightening. The rents at the minute compared to what I was renting properties at 10 years ago. And the vast majority of that has come as a result of the changes in legislation and tax. Yeah.
And to be fair, some of it you can understand, with the regulation and with the legislation that is coming in, because some of it is beneficial, especially in terms of health and safety, and trying to ensure the property is safe enough for tenants and stuff. On the other hand, there is certain things where it's, as you say, far too much red tape, and because of that, then the rent's going up for something which, if you used common sense.
If it was me, my strategy would be for the government. If you buy an investment property to rent out, you either have to do a course or have a license, or the property's going to be managed by a licensed operator as well.
Yeah.
It's like farming. If you go do farming, you're encouraged. Maybe go as far as to say I think you have to do particular courses. I might be wrong about that, but that's simply to make sure that everything is done properly, and it should be the exact same for investment property.
You say, you's not going out in the tractor later on tonight?
Go for a rip. Get the dealer boots on. And the check shirt.
He said, "Oh God, could you imagine two of us stuck in a tractor cab together? That'd be good crack." Last couple sort of scenarios, Roy. Obviously, when you buy a property, you, especially as an investment, you 9 times out of 10 are expecting that property to either be of a similar price to what you purchased it for, or you are hoping that it has some sort of added value to it. What happens if the valuation comes in below what you purchased it?
So you think about if you remortgage it down the line or straight away?
Just if, for example, you chose in 5 years' time that, you know what, I've had enough, I want to get out here, and you go to sell the property, you go to try and sell it in the open market, and you realise I paid 40 grand more for that than what they're currently offering.
Again, thankfully that doesn't happen too often, but you have to take the rough with the smooth. And again, it comes back to your viewpoint. I would deal with investors who at times maybe buy a property. Their view is, listen, it's cheap, it's not in a good area, the house isn't in good quality, but they're still going to get really good rent for it. And their view is, well, if I hold the house for 5 years, 10 years, and I sell it for what I paid for it, they're still up money. So that type of person, they've immediately bought it with that, that correct mindset, the cautious mindset, the structured mindset. But if you have just simply bought a house thinking, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to hold it for a few years, I'm going to make lots of money, well, you're not really a true investor, and you've taken an uneducated gamble, which hasn't worked out.
And I suppose, sort of, just to put some, because most people might, well, you buy a house, the chances are it's going to go up. But would that be a case of, say, for example, you buy it in a new build development, the development doesn't get finished, and roads maybe haven't been fully, properly done, and there's, pathways haven't been done, and it looks a bit rough, and it's not being managed properly, and things like that. Is that what then can sort of bring the value of the property down, because the complete area hasn't been finished?
It can be. It's normally maybe an area has pulled it down for particular reasons. Maybe the wrong type of clientele has maybe been brought in, or not brought in. Basically, the wrong clientele maybe rented, and they're not looking after properties, which, well, that could be, could be tenants not looking after, it could be landlords not looking after it. So if you have that the wrong mindset and a handful of properties in a development like that, then that can pull the image down, which then can pull the price down as well. Yeah.
Things like antisocial behaviour, things like that there.
Yeah.
Right. Final kind of one is investor funds are delayed or pulled. So, for example, you're buying property, you're obviously using a private investor. You've looked at property, you have them all lined up, and all of a sudden he's decided, I'm pulling out. What kind of would you do there? Is it just a case of, again, you've now realised that you're not going to be able to fulfil what you'd hoped for?
The buyer is probably in difficulties. I'm coming across quite a few people who are wanting to jump in to the whole property market. They've maybe done a couple of courses. They think it's easy. They're running around and they're approaching people that maybe with a bit of money. And then they realise, well, halfway through the transaction, they don't know that investor strong enough, and they haven't got that relationship. Maybe the investor has led them up the garden path, and whenever it comes to handing over the money, it's a different ball game. So if you are an investor and you're relying on private finance, you need to be certain that you have got that money, and whether you know that person or not. Because if you've signed a contract and you're like, oh, I'm all right, I'm private finance, I'm getting the money, and it doesn't come good, you've signed that contract, you can be legally binding, and you are committed to buying that property. So that means your other assets could be at risk if you don't fulfill that purchase.
Yeah.
So true seasoned and professional investors will be okay. It's maybe a lot of these newcomers into it that think it's very easy, that don't really understand the risks of it. They're the ones who could potentially get nipped.
And I actually never thought about the fact of, I was coming at it probably from an angle of before the contract had been signed. But as you are rightly mentioned there, once the contract signs that, you locked in.
Yeah.
And if you still haven't received the money from whoever says they were going to back you, and then they just downright refuse to give it to you because they're like, no, you don't want to pull out. Yeah. As you're right in what you're saying, then you're obviously obligated for, especially if you're taking out a mortgage, things like that there,
And there's added compliance complications as well, because when you're buying a house, you have to show to the solicitor where are those funds coming from. Are they genuine? Are they legitimate? That's all well and good. They might be coming from an investor and who will be legitimate, but you're adding an extra step and process into it, and normally that's not maybe done towards the end, because a lot of these new people into the property are like, oh, I'm cash, and they go through the whole process. They've maybe locked into the contract, and then it comes to the money side of things, and at that point they're scrambling to get bank statements and ID documents, and if they don't pass the checks with the solicitor, then that's it. The whole thing's collapsed.
That is essentially, Roy, all the different scenarios that I've kind of had sort of half thought up on. I did want to sort of touch then, was there anything else that maybe you wanted to touch on? I know obviously then as well, at the moment, property market's strong, and we are seeing it. I was speaking to someone recently, they were actually bidding on a house or a property, and it was about 30,000 above asking, and didn't seem like the bidding was slowing down at the moment. Is there a difficulty getting property at the minute, or is there property maybe still readily available out there that maybe just isn't on the market yet? Or
there's different properties get different demand. So if you have the real busy market is the home mover. So if you're a home mover and it's a good house in a good area, everybody's scrambling over it, and there's lots of offers and lots of bids and what have you going on it. What I call the lower end of the market, that's maybe just attracting the investor, because the investor, that's for areas that the tenants only want to move into, for rented areas. That market is quite strong as well. There wouldn't be the same amount of bidding that there is involved in it, but there's a lot of investors out there who maybe just don't have time to go out round viewing those houses, and are probably maybe put off just for the fact of, well, if I go to look at it, the figures stack up. Maybe if there's another 2 or 3 bids go on it, then it doesn't pay. But at the minute, I'm working with quite a few. There's a lot of people. I'm taken aback with this podcast. Quite a few people from both contacting me, investors looking me to source properties for them, and then also a few people have contacted me to say, Roy, for a number of reasons, like I've about 4 or 5 properties at the minute where I'm sitting with that for a number of reasons. They want to get out of the market. So for instance, a couple of them are moving back to their own home, a few of them are matrimonial issues. They're looking just out, genuine reasons. They want a price for the house. They don't want the hassle of going through agents and bidding up and surveys and basically the time. They want to cut out the time, and they're willing to basically sell them, and they get real good returns. So if anybody's out there who's either a seasoned investor or looking to be a hands-off investor, give me a shout. I've got those 4 to 5 properties that I could match you up with straight away.
Is that kind of the style of property? is that one where you kind of, it's just, here's my price. I don't want to mess about. I don't want to back and forward bidding here. That's the price. If you're happy enough to take it off my hands,
Yeah.
away we go.
Yes.
That's episode 33.
Thank you, Chris.
33. Thank you very much. That's a few scenarios for the listeners to wrap their head around. I already have next episode all lined out ready for you, so we'll be getting that recorded very, very soon. And thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back shortly with the next episode.
Brilliant. Thank you.